I was on a first date with a guy named Jesse, climbing Fryman Canyon. It was a beautiful day, gorgeous day. Not too warm, not too cold, the breeze was just right. He brought his wonderful dog with him, Sammy. Suddenly, out of the blue, he says to me, "How do you feel about marriage and kids?" I was behind him a few paces, so I thought maybe I heard him wrong. Who asked that on a first date, right? It's not a very sexy question. And I was wearing a sexy t-shirt. I was wearing my vintage I Love New York that I had tossed in the dryer until it fit me just right, outlining my physical assets, and yet also a subliminal reminder that I am, after all, from New York, so don't mess with me, okay? Unless, of course, I want you to mess with me. I would later find out that the answer to the question of who asks on a first date, "How do you feel about marriage and kids?" is somebody who wants marriage and kids. Someone who is unabashedly unashamed of that desire, who is in fact proud of it, who has worked through any sort of issues they have about bringing it up to men and scaring them off. In fact, they are standing strong in that steadfast goal and weeding out potential mates who aren't interested. The last guy that I had gone out with was a belly dancer. He wore so many bells and feathers that he literally jingled when he walked. No one had asked me the marriage and kids question before, and I was over 40. So, marriage, I had had my share of relationships with men. I'm gay. And I had always wanted monogamy. I'm just built that way. So marriage was this refreshing option to have so directly put on the table. And to have it put there by somebody who I would actually marry, well, that only sweetened the pot. This was before marriage equality made same-sex marriage legal nationwide. This was actually during the Proposition 8 period. You remember Proposition 8, the proposition that California voted in to ban us from getting married because we were having such a good time going up to San Francisco and getting married. So this was during that dark period. So when asked how I felt about it, I felt angry. I felt resentful. I had gone and done a lot of chicken dances at weddings, and I couldn't get married myself. But I also felt hopeful, because you see, I knew that in the tradition of Stonewall and Oscar Wilde and Dan Savage, I knew that gay people were not going to take that Proposition 8 nonsense lying down. I knew that we had lawyers somewhere strategically planning our next move. And it turns out I was right. Kids, though, kids with a man, that was a completely different question to be asked. Now, I probably should have had more experience with that than I did, but I didn't really have any. Two friends, my friends, Tim and Jason, who they're so perfect. They're like catalog people. They're like Stepford catalog people. And I thought, if I have to be like them, oh, that made me very nervous. And the other story that I had heard personally was at a dinner party in Fire Island, this very science fiction story these men told me about eggs incubated in a laboratory somewhere, combined with the sperm that they would each put in a test tube, and then, well, I don't know what they would do with it, but I knew that they both stood an equal chance of being the biological father. And I remember thinking, why would you want to do that? Because if I was the kid, the first thing I would do is go out and get a DNA test the minute I was old enough, because I would want to know, right? Wouldn't you? I knew I didn't want any of that. On our first date, to be honest, the thought of kids, it terrified me, and it intrigued me simultaneously. But this light went on in the back of my head. And watching Jesse in his gym clothes climbing Fryman Canyon, I thought, he looks really good. I've probably got a lot of time. Cut to us falling in love, getting engaged, Proposition 8 repealed, the best wedding ever. I mean, everybody says that, but we really did have the best wedding. Marriage equality nationwide, and then my now husband, Jesse, strolling into our home 1 year into our marriage and telling me he just met the most terrific lady named Jamie at a spin class, no less, who is a social worker who handles adoptions for same-sex couples. I thought, wow, that happened really fast. Enter Vista Del Mar and the concept of foster to adopt. That's who Jamie worked for. I was really grateful that we both felt strongly about adoption. I knew that I didn't want to father a child myself. It's expensive, number one, and there's that tricky thing called the mother of the child. And me personally, I've always felt that being gay, therefore not being organically drawn to women sexually, sort of proved that I should have a child another way. So we started this journey with Jamie. She asked us for transparency. And I had a lot of fears, and I threw a lot of fears at her right away. I said to her, number one, I'm approaching 50. I was worried that I was going to be too old. Turns out, I'm not. I've had a physical. I'm in great shape. My husband's 12 years younger. We're on our way. I was worried about money, which I think a lot of expectant fathers are. But she told us that they help with a stipend. They also help with health insurance until the child is 18. Exactly. I knew that foster meant that something had happened in the biological home and that the child was being raised temporarily with foster parents until whatever it needed to be could be straightened out. I knew that we didn't want to do that. We wanted to raise a child and be in it for the long haul. We knew that was a noble endeavor, but it wasn't what we wanted. I found out that foster to adopt means that something has happened and the child is not going back. Either the parents have signed off or the child's been permanently taken away. At first, this made me uncomfortable, this idea that the joy of receiving a child would be mixed up with some sort of neglect or abuse. But I've learned a lot since then. And what I've learned is that, most importantly, is that these kids deserve loving homes, and we have a loving home, and we want to be that home. So it began. It started with an 8-week class, which we could never miss one of, in a room that had absolutely no ventilation. It was in this room with other prospective parents, other gay couples, other straight couples, even single people, that we began to have an inkling of what it would be like to have a child that comes from trauma. These kids may act out. They may not. What are our resources? How do we react? The most important thing I learned, I think, in that class is that I have my skill set, Jesse has his skill sets, and together, our combined skill sets make us the best team dad. We've had 3 home visits where we proved that we have little plastic covers on electrical outlets. We have locks on pills and poisons and knives. We have filled out lengthy questionnaires answering questions about who doled out the discipline growing up and how. I explained that my mother never actually hit me with a wooden spoon, but that she had 3 boys and she wasn't above an ominous threat waving it in the air. We answered questions about who died where and when and how. It brings up every possible insecurity and fear for me to talk about with my husband, right down to how busy our lives are. I've started this game with him when we're at our most busy. I will come home from work, I'll be changing really fast to run out the door to some event at the nonprofit that he runs, and I look at him and I go, add a kid to this moment right now. Where are they? What are they doing? Who are we? What's happening? It's a great exercise because it forces you to be right there in the moment. I'm not going to share our solutions with you, but I'm going to tell you, we have solutions. And that's the one thing I learned, is that I can talk to my husband. It's exciting. My fears, if I told you my fears about this, they're probably like most expectant fathers, and they're also uniquely gay. I worry things like, if we adopt a son, will he be exactly the same kind of kid that tormented me growing up? And then I think, how could he if I raise him? I wonder if this love that I share with my husband, that makes me want to do this in the first place, will that be exactly the thing thrown in our faces during teenage rebellion and angst? Who knows? Who can plan for such things? I know that the world is not always this school on Olympic. I know that where I come from, that taking the hand of my husband is an activist act. That I think about who's watching, where are we? I don't care who's watching, he's my husband. I'm going to take his hand wherever I want. These are just minuscule thoughts considering what will come up for us when we're raising a child together. And I think about all of it. Here's what I know, okay? And if you're a parent and you think differently, don't come up to me afterward because I don't want to know, because this is what I'm going with, okay? Love is what I got, okay? We are going to love this kid in the face of everything. Whatever gender, whatever race we decide on, we have been asked the question, are we open to race? We want an infant to 2 years old. I was actually just talking to somebody backstage, Jesse. We might want 3 to 5. That's another story. But we are open to all races. That's the most amazing question for me. This Irish kid who grew up in an Irish Catholic home in this little town. I've taught my family everything they know about gay. My Irish Catholic father sobbing in the front row of our wedding. Now we get to be open to all races and see what comes next for us. It's very, very exciting. So we are going to love this kid, and we are going to throw as much love as this kid, no matter who's watching, no matter where we are, no matter who the president is. Love is what I got. Thanks.